It was the summer of 1565. The Mediterranean burned beneath the sun, and from the east, the shadow of an empire stretched across the waves once more. An Ottoman armada, one of the greatest fleets ever assembled, sailed westward. Its target was small, a rocky island in the middle of the sea, ruled by a few thousand Christian knights. But if that island fell, the road to Italy, and Rome itself, would lie open. This is the story of the Siege of Malta, a siege that turned a tiny island into the wall that stopped an empire. The Knights of St. John had once ruled from Rhodes, but the Ottomans had driven them out decades earlier. Homeless and humiliated, the knights swore vengeance. Eventually, they were granted Malta, a barren rock, but one with a perfect harbor. From there, their ships raided Ottoman trade routes, striking like hornets from the sea. To the Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent, this was intolerable. The time had come to erase them forever. In May of 1565, over 30,000 Ottoman soldiers set sail from Constantinople. They carried hundreds of cannons, siege towers, and enough supplies to conquer an empire. At their head rode Mustafa Pasha, the empire's best general, and Dragut, the legendary corsair feared across the Mediterranean. Waiting for them on Malta were barely 4,000 defenders, a mix of knights, local militia, and a handful of Spanish soldiers. Led by Grand Master Jean de Valette, a man 70 years old but unbroken by age. When told the Ottoman fleet numbered in the tens of thousands, he simply said, "We are few, but the faith we defend is great." The armada appeared off the coast on May 18th. The sea turned black with ships, cannons rolled ashore, and soon the thunder of bombardment began. The Ottomans attacked the smaller forts first, Fort St. Elmo, guarding the entrance to the Grand Harbor. For the knights inside, there would be no escape. Day after day, Ottoman artillery pounded the walls. Stones turned to dust, towers collapsed, and yet the defenders held on. When their commander was offered a chance to surrender, he refused. He wrote to Valette, "We will fight until the last man, so that others may live free." After a month of relentless assault, Fort St. Elmo finally fell. The few survivors were executed. Their bodies were nailed to crosses and floated across the harbor as a warning. Valette answered in kind. Ottoman prisoners were executed, their heads fired from cannons back at the enemy camp. The siege had become a war of annihilation, but the Sultan's army had paid a terrible price. Thousands of elite janissaries had died taking a single fort, and worse, Dragut, the Ottoman admiral, was struck by a cannonball and killed. Still, Mustafa pressed on. He turned his full fury on Fort St. Michael and Fort St. Angelo, where Valette himself commanded. For weeks, waves of soldiers stormed the breaches, only to be driven back by the knights' fire and steel. Even wounded, even starving, the defenders would not yield. Then came September. The summer heat broke, and with it came disease. The Ottoman camp began to rot. Food spoiled, water ran out, and morale crumbled. From Sicily, a relief army of Spanish and Italian troops finally landed on the island. They struck the exhausted Ottomans from the rear. The invaders broke. Panic spread through their camp. What had begun as a conquest ended as a rout. After 4 months of blood and fire, the Ottoman army retreated, leaving 10,000 dead on the shores of Malta. When word reached Europe, bells rang from Madrid to Rome. The impossible siege had been won. Valette and his 4,000 men had done what entire kingdoms had failed to do. They had stopped the greatest empire on earth. Suleiman, humiliated, would never again send an army west. The Mediterranean was saved, and Malta, that small rock in the sea, became a legend. In the centuries that followed, the island would bear the scars of that summer. Broken walls, mass graves, and stories whispered of knights who fought on with limbs missing and armor shattered. But their courage became a symbol that even the smallest fortress, when held with faith and fury, can stand against the tide of empires. The Siege of Malta was not just a battle, it was proof that determination can turn stone into steel. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to AG Chronicle for more epic tales of courage and conquest. Tell us, what do you think truly wins a siege? Cannons, strategy, or unbreakable will? Until next time, remember, walls may fall, but courage endures forever.